Welcome to FedScoop TV. I'm Wyatt Cash, and we're here at the 8th annual Lowering the Cost of Government IT Forum, and today I'm with Shawn Kingsberry. Shawn is Director of Digital Government for the global public sector, a lot of the world to cover, for Unisys. So welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. Well, I think one of the things we wanted to ask your perspective on is what advances in IT that you believe agencies should really be looking for now to boost efficiency for their missions, all while trying to improve their savings outlook, given kind of where we are with the convergence of a variety of technologies.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. So my response is going to probably be different than what you would think. It's actually focused on understanding what the work is, meaning from a governance perspective, focusing on what is our mission from a strategic goals and objectives and appropriation perspective, and then aligning that to what investments do we currently have that's enabling us to meet our strategic goals and objectives. It's very common from a government perspective to focus on that shiny new piece of software or system that's supposed to solve all the problems. But in essence, that causes actually lots of issues when you look at the ability to actually deliver value out the other end and begin to look at how much duplicity you have in purchasing if you immediately focus on buying versus understanding the breadth of the services and how IT is connected to the overall mission. So now from that perspective, you can then connect into transformation of digital services versus stovepipe services, which that begins to get you into an opportunity to drive down cost.
Well, certainly you'd say services have evolved pretty extensively now, so we're not really buying things anymore nearly as much as the services that right on top of them. Would you agree?
That's right. I mean, so if you go backwards, if you look at it from a journey standpoint, we go back to, we started with centralized computing. Right? And from a centralized computing perspective from a government vantage point, we focused on managing what was in the glass house versus the services out the other end. Then you get into decentralized computing. We were coming up to developing better methods to manage these desktops and servers and what have you. And then we moved into the e-government era, where there was a focus on policy that enables us to better deliver services while better managing these assets. And now we're into the digital government era, where it's flipped on its head, where we're focused on value, user-centered design, user-centered approaches to deliver government services, with an assumption that these technological innovations that exist today are there, and now we need to tap into it to drive services, to drive value and benefit realization.
Well, talk to me a little about IT modernization. We know there's two bills on the Hill. Hopefully when the House and Senate come back, we'll get those funded. But what would you tell representatives and senators about the urgency for modernization of agency systems and why we need to get going faster than we've been?
Well, there's an expectation of citizens and government employees to be able to interact with the government the way they interact with commercial organizations. When you start to look at the Airbnb, Waze, Netflix, and what have you. So if we're going, if the government is going to enable that level of innovation, they have to actually look at the way the private sector delivers these services. And if you look at several firms from research organizations, they actually state that that is the goal that the government is doing, is looking at the playbook of companies that were born digital and looking at how they could begin to transform to deliver better government services. Now, if you look at the stovepiped aging systems from a government standpoint, it's very challenging to be agile and deliver rich services, gaining insight from large amounts of data, focusing on users, user-centered design with the infrastructure we have today. So there's a huge urgency from my perspective to transform, modernize, to move to a digital way of delivering services.
Well, when you were working in government, I know you were one of the early proponents of using the cloud. It's 5 years now since governments had the opportunity to really find their way and use the cloud. Where do you see cloud going next for agencies, or more importantly, how should agencies look at the cloud today to take better advantage of it?
So I think the government, and I'm going to say industry as a whole, I think we're at a place where we stop looking at cloud as a noun, right? We talk about the cloud.
Right.
And it's more of an enabler to deliver services. I mean, if you really step back and look at, let's say, system boundaries as an example, system boundaries are blurred now.
They are.
Right? I mean, because to deliver government services is no longer based on connecting to, quote unquote, an agency's systems.
Right.
It's really interconnecting public systems, other agency systems, and individual agency systems, and making gaining insight and delivering rich services to the citizens. Now, if that's so, let's peel that onion. Now everyone lives in a hybrid configuration.
Right.
We talk about the Internet of Things, right? But it's not the Internet of Things as a place to go. It's an enabler of how we deliver services. So it's a change. So there's the first thing is to understand that cloud is not a noun. It's an enabler, and the focus needs to be on value, delivering rich government services faster, anytime, any place, on any device.
Well, moving on briefly to cybersecurity, we know there's constrained budgets. We know there's a huge urgency. How would you describe where we need to be going right now in determining strategies and spending for federal agencies when it comes to cybersecurity? So,
from my perspective, there's a need for an investment in organization. Meaning, if you actually look at several incidents that took place over the past couple of years, if you look close, you'll see that it wasn't necessarily a technology issue. It was really people and process, meaning people actually paying attention to daily, weekly, monthly, having processes in play to actually act on those issues, right? In parallel with that, people that actually are skilled enough to understand how to determine a real threat versus a false positive. So now when you begin to marry that up with how industry can help, right? Now there's this technology that enables the governance process to be successful, to be efficient, right? To understand as much as possible false positives versus real threats, and connecting the dots. So there is a people, process, and technology investment required, but the people and process can start today.
And briefly, in the time we have left, you get to see a lot of emerging technologies, decide how it can apply at federal agencies. What's one or two technologies that looks interesting to you right now or for the next year that agencies might want to take a closer look at?
Security is front and center, right, in front of our last discussion. So there are lots of innovative technologies in the security space. When you look at the government requirement for zone-based architecture, the micro-segmentation place to me is probably one of the most interesting areas that can provide the most value by segmenting access and making systems on the network invisible. So if you can't see it, you can't attack it. Right? So that is very important. And now you couple micro-segmentation, and you know, Unisys actually has a stealth product that plays in that space. But when you connect that to analytics, right, to be able to gain insight, to understand how to connect the dots between potential threat and actual threat, there's massive value there. The key is using data to gain insight on focus, meaning making data-driven decisions.
Super. Well, Shawn Kingsberry, thanks so much for joining us today, and we thank our audience as well. I'm Wyatt Cash with FedScoop TV, and you can see more of our programs on fedscoop.com. Thanks for being with us.